There was an exchange in the New South Wales Parliament that I think that every single firearm owner should hear, because the Honourable Sarah Mitchell asked the New South Wales Premier Chris Minns a couple of very, very important questions about the gun buyback. And honestly, the answers tell us a lot about exactly what the policy is actually designed to do. So rather than me, sitting here and telling you what it was, have a listen.
How many criminals will hand in their firearms as part of your gun buyback?
Well, it's hard to know. I mean, if they have already been convicted of a criminal offence and been deemed not eligible to hold a gun licence, the truth of the matter is we can't always tell who's going to be a criminal before they are a criminal.
Okay, so how many unregistered or illegal firearms do you estimate will be taken off the streets by this buyback?
Well, this is a program not designed for illegal weapons. This is lawful weapons in the community.
And that's the important part. This is a program not designed for illegal weapons. This is a pretty significant admission, because it tells us exactly where the attention is being directed, not towards illegal firearm owners or already, guns that are circulating outside of the licensing system. This particular buyback is dealing with firearms currently held by lawful people in the community. And I think that deserves some proper scrutiny. And before we get into the rest of it, if you enjoy my videos and you want to help me support this channel, well, there's Buy Me a Coffee link below. I really would appreciate the support, because this channel is 100% independent. There's no sponsors telling me what to do or what I can and can't say. So if you want to help me keep researching and taking the time to make these videos, I generally do appreciate the support. And if you can't support financially, that's completely fine as well. Make sure you watch and comment, and sharing my videos really does help as well. So what Sarah Mitchell did here was actually really, really simple. She took the discussion away from the broad statements about public safety and asked about people everyone supposedly wants firearm laws to deal with: criminals, illegal firearms, unregistered firearms. And once you ask that question that way, it forces us to look at the policy, what it's actually doing. Licensed firearm owners already operate inside a very heavy regulated system. You have licensing requirements, registration requirements, storage requirements, rules about what categories of firearms that you can own, and rules about where and when and how and why they can be used. And if you do not comply to any of those rules, there are consequences. So the people affected by the lawful firearm gun back are, by definition, largely the people government already knows about. They know who has the firearms. They know what the firearm is, and they know it is registered. And they know that the owner has already gone through the entire licensing process. That makes lawful firearm owners very, very, very easy to regulate. The difficult part is dealing with the people who do not care about those laws. Somebody who desperately possesses an illegal firearm has already decided licensing rules and registration rules and firearm prohibitions. They don't care. They don't care at all. That's the completely different enforcement problem. And that's why this distinction matters. If the problem is, illegal firearm trafficking, well, then put resources into illegal firearm trafficking. If organized crime groups are sourcing firearms, well, go after those networks. If prohibited people are unlawfully holding or possessing firearms, focus police resources on that. And if there are weaknesses in the intelligence sharing or the enforcement, well, fix those weaknesses. Those are targeted responses. But when somebody who has followed every single rule suddenly finds that firearm they lawfully possessed can no longer be kept, that's something completely different. And the government should have to explain exactly what the public safety benefit comes from doing it. Well, then Sarah Mitchell moved into another very, very important part of this: the money. So have a listen to this.
Just in relation to the cost of the buyback, you've said hundreds of $1 million. You said also that the Commonwealth, I think your words were, there was a generous budget allocation from the Commonwealth.
Again, it's demand driven. So they've agreed to the parameters and the circumstances relating to the buyback, but in many respects it's demand driven, so it'll change.
But how do you know then that it's a generous budget allocation? Have you talked to the Prime Minister about how much? You've said hundreds of millions of dollars. Has he committed the same to you for this?
He has, and the reason I would determine it a generous budget allocation is that they've agreed to carry the full cost of the destruction of the weapons, which is a significant cost for the state.
Now we're talking about potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. And according to the Premier, well, the program is demand driven. He also said that Commonwealth had agreed to cover the full cost of destroying the firearms. So now there is another question. What are taxpayers actually getting for their money? Because counting how many firearms are surrendered, well, that's easy. Government can eventually announce that 10,000 or 20,000 or however many firearms were handed in. But that number already does not tell us whether the community has become safer. The real measure should be what happens to the criminals. Did firearm-related offending decrease? Did organised criminals become less able to access firearms? What illegal firearm trafficking reduced? Were dangerous people actually prevented from getting access to weapons? Those are the outcomes that matter, and simply reducing the number of lawfully registered firearms is not automatically the same thing as reducing criminal firearm use. And I think the government needs to be very, very careful about treating those two things as though they are interchangeable. There's also a broader principle here that I have spoken about before, that collective punishment. And when somebody commits a serious crime, there is enormous pressure on the government to respond. And the government should respond, absolutely. But the response should be directed towards the problem. So why are we continually seeing firearm owners is the one person that something terrible happens and thousands of people who have done absolutely nothing wrong end up facing new restrictions? Another category is changed, another firearm gets prohibited, another limit gets introduced. Something lawfully purchased suddenly has to be surrendered, and meanwhile people who have followed the rules are expected to absorb those consequences and the costs. That should bother people even if they don't own firearms, because this is really a question about good government. When something goes wrong, do we identify the actual failure or fix it? Or do we introduce broad restrictions because the people affected are easily to identify and easy to regulate? And those are not necessarily the same thing. And just to be very clear, none of this means firearm ownership should be completely unregulated. It does not mean illegal firearm possession should be ignored. Quite the opposite. If somebody is illegally supplying firearms to criminals, deal with them. If somebody is unlawfully carrying a firearm, well, deal with them. If somebody is prohibited from owning one and they have one anyway, make sure you enforce the law. But if the government wants to take lawfully owned property from people who have committed no offence, well, then there needs to be very strong evidence based on that reason for doing it, especially when hundreds of millions of taxpayers' dollars are being involved. And that's why I think Sarah Mitchell's questions were very, very important. They were not complicated questions. How many criminals are going to participate? How many illegal firearms will actually be removed? And what is this cost going to do? Those are exactly the questions Parliament should be asking, because good public policy should not be about being able to survive basic scrutiny. If this buyback generally makes New South Wales safer, government should be able to demonstrate how. Tell us what you think of the comments. Tell me what you think down in the comments. And tell me how it's going to be measured. And when there's a program is finished, show us whether those outcomes were actually achieved. That's accountability. Because the goal should never simply be to say the government did something. The goal should be to make sure that what the government did actually work. And when the Premier himself says that this program is not designed for illegal weapons, I think Australia are entitled to ask one very simple question. What are they trying to achieve? So let me know what you think in the comments. And do you believe that this buyback is addressing the real problem? Or are law-abiding firearm owners once again being targeted to carry the consequences for the crimes they did not commit? And if you found this video useful, make sure you give it a like, subscribe, and also share it around. And I'll see you in the next one.